Buchanan is not here. Mark Ortler.
Present.
David Goldsmith is not here. Anujan Jibrakash is not here. Wade Kelly.
Here.
Milan Ramsey.
Here.
Sam Shapiro-Klein is not present. Bruce Wessel.
Present.
Vice Chair Amy Anderson.
Here.
And Chair Mike Soloff.
Here. Okay, we have a quorum, so we can begin the meeting. We're going to begin with item 1, which is public input on items that do not appear on the agenda. See, we do actually have 2 members of the public sitting in the room today. Would either of you like to speak to an item that is not on the agenda tonight? Okay. We'll move on then to item 2, which is public input on items that are on the agenda. Would either of you like to comment on anything that's on the agenda tonight?
Yes,
Yes, and your name is?
Deborah Lynch.
Hi, Deborah. Why don't you go ahead and...
I don't have a comment, but
What,
I do
hang
have...
on 1 second. What is our standard for time for people to do this? Do we have a time?
3 minutes.
2 minutes.
2 minutes? Thank you. 2 minutes.
Okay, 2 minutes. If you can't get it done that time, let us know and we'll decide whether to grant you some more time.
I don't have a comment, but I do have a question, because it was missing on the last meeting report you had, your Measure GS finance report. I don't see it anywhere.
You mean the amount, you mean the thing that's on,
Staff administrative items?
right, under 9A?
Yes.
Yes, well, we'll see what we're told when we get to under 9A.
Oh, I see, it's not available.
There's no written report.
Okay.
It's going to be oral.
Okay,
There
I
was-
didn't understand.
But there was, you attached this to the agenda of the
Yeah.
last meeting. I did.
No, it was under, that was under the member discussion items that you had
Right.
presented, not under the staff admin items.
That was a presentation of your analysis.
Right, but I thought you gave this to people before the meeting.
There was a highlighted, it was highlighted in the first report,
That
and
was-
I couldn't click on it.
That was part of your presentation. This time it's a staff admin.
Was it a handout at the last meeting?
It was a handout at last meeting.
Okay.
The Bruce's update. We have.
Yeah, maybe we can get a copy made, and provided to the
Wait,
member of the public.
I can get it.
At least
okay.
see what Bruce had put together at the last meeting, and we'll see when we get to 9A what we reported on tonight. Okay. So I think that completes item 2. We're now on item 3, special agenda items. There are none. So we'll now go to item 5, which is the consent calendar, which is the October 6th, 2025 minutes. Have people seen those?
Yeah, I wanted to make one suggested amendment that under 9, staff administrative items, it says the committee was provided with a status update handout of the city's housing trust funds. So I think that refers to the September 4th, 2025 submission to the council, and you gave us a copy of it. So I would just say update handout dated September 4th, 2025 of the city's housing trust funds that had been provided to the city council.
I'm looking at the draft here, and it looks like that from the October 6th meeting, under item 9A, whatever handout is part of that is going to be linked to the agenda, to the minutes, is that right? And it looks like similarly that the report that Bruce was just mentioning on revenue is also going to be linked to the minutes. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so just to respond to the member of the public's question, when these minutes are posted online, and afterwards, if you need to know where the website is, we'll be happy to assist you to know where that is. You'll be able to click right there and you'll get at least what at the last meeting was provided regarding the funding under item 9A and also under 13A.
And that link will be, if it's not working, it'll be updated.
Okay, I do have another report, a status update for that same meeting, September 4th. Would that include that? It had to do with funds? Housing trust fund?
Yes,
Okay.
9A,
Okay.
which is the status update from the staff, and 13A, which is the report on revenue
Okay.
that member Plus will put together, will both be linked to the minutes.
Okay.
All right, are there any other proposed corrections to the minutes? Okay, does somebody want to make a motion? I'll second that. Any discussion? Do we have to roll call vote on this, or can we just take it?
You do a voice vote.
Okay, so all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that motion carries. That completes item 5. I'm sorry, I made a mistake, because we're on item 6, which was actually, so item 2 was meant to be only discussion of special agenda items and consent calendar. So this is your last chance as a member of the public. If there's anything you want to say about the remaining items on tonight's agenda, speak now or forever hold your peace, at least until next month. Okay, hearing none, we're done with item 6. We'll now move on to item 9, staff administrative items, and we'll begin with item 9A, Measure GS Finance Report.
Hi, good evening. This will be a brief report. There's no new transactions that the city received during this time period. That doesn't mean that they didn't happen, but we just didn't receive them. Sometimes there's a bit of delay. Then there was questions from last committee meeting. There's still some outstanding ones, just given city finance, how busy they were with the recent reallocation plan. But I was able to get some answers in regards to the question about where Measure GS funds were invested and how they were invested. Those are invested in accordance to the city's investment policy as set by city council. And there is a policy on that I will get a copy of that and send that out to the committee as well. And then in terms of the question of how much has it earned, that I have not been able to get an answer from finance on, just given the other priorities that have been occurring in the last month. But I will hopefully have an answer next month on that one. And then the last question about the annual report that is outlined in the ballot measure, that is in the city's, it was in the fiscal year 2022-2023 annual comprehensive financial reports, or also known as the ACFR, and it was specifically called out separate in there. And I'll also send that out as well for this committee's review.
Any questions or?
Just in terms of, we don't have any updates on income beyond what we learned last time. So this year, through August, through the first 6 months of the year, it was 16 million came in, less the 10 million that goes to the schools. So we won't know until more months come in how we're doing. The first year was 28 million, the second year was 24 million, and we're at 16 million for this year. And the big variable is if someone sells a building for $100 million, as they did in the first year and the second year, that's an extra 5 million. So if that doesn't happen in this year, it means we'll be down 5 million. So that's a huge variable in figuring out how much money will actually come in.
Very good. Would it be possible, in addition to sending those to the committee members, to similarly link those to the minutes of this meeting, so that if anyone in the public's interested, they can just click on it and review those themselves?
So you're going to get that information before the next meeting, or we don't know? We have.
Yeah, those are both reports that are finalized, And so I'll send those out to the committee this week, and then I'll also provide it to Thomas to include in the minutes as well for the public.
That's the interest and that sort of thing.
And the audit report.
It would be the audit report, which is the city's just comprehensive report, so that includes all of the city funds, but Measure GS has been pulled out, to the best it can, and it's separately analyzed as part of that report. So that was done in fiscal year 22-23 and fiscal year 23-24. 24-25 has not been completed yet. And then the city's investment policy is something city council has approved. I'm not sure on the date it was last updated.
Just my other question would be, so if there's money earned on these funds, they're credited to the homelessness prevention and affordable housing?
That's the question I haven't been provided an answer with yet, that I will hope to at the next meeting.
Okay.
Encourage them to say yes.
I will try.
You would
Okay.
think that would have been covered in the measure.
Yeah.
Blame the folks in that.
It's not like they're in the room.
Okay, anything else on 9A? All right, and we'll go on to 9B, which is the proposed process for staff recommended funding proposals.
All right, me again. So there's a handout that was included in the agenda as well as a printed out one. It's just one page front to back. Staff in Housing and Human Services, which again is made up of 3 divisions. We wanted to lay out a clear process for when there were staff recommended funding proposals for Measure GS that fit within those, of how to present it to the oversight committee before bringing those to city council. So this process is, what staff is recommending for this committee's feedback and consideration. At least from the housing division and also homelessness and prevention and intervention, HPI and human services. I think there's a variety of programs and needs that are there. And in the housing division, some of the more immediate needs that Measure GS could be utilized for are some of the impacts that are right now happening in the federal government with our voucher programs and our federal funds. That Measure GS, if there were impacts, could help maintain housing stability for those households. And then at times there's council direction for programs that Measure GS might be the best use of those funds. So that would be another time this process would be utilized. So I can walk through the process and happy to answer any questions on it. So, funding proposals from the staff would be presented to this oversight committee at least 1 week before the scheduled committee meeting. In the proposal, which is on the back, there's a template. It would include a description of the program or the initiative, funding amounts that are requested, and intended outcomes, its funding purpose, as well as if there's a council directive, a clear community need, and then a timeline and implementation. Staff would present the proposal during the scheduled meeting, and committee members could ask for additional information or revisions before deciding to endorse a funding proposal. The committee would have up to 2 meetings to provide input and feedback before staff moves the funding proposal to city council for consideration. If the committee decides to support or denial of support, that would be included in the city council staff report. And then that would be advanced to city council for their consideration for approval. And then staff would provide quarterly updates to the committee on the status of those funded programs. And then on the back of this page is a template of what a funding proposal would look like.
Do any members have questions? Yes, go ahead, Mark.
What are the pathways to submit proposals? Do they come through, is staff the pathway?
So ultimately, city council is the one who would decide how Measure GS funds are utilized. Staff is one pathway, another pathway, and I believe it's on the agenda for tonight, is that the committee can also make recommendations for that as well. And that can also be in partnership with city staff as well.
Thank you.
Any other members with questions? Bruce?
And so, in the 50% bucket that's supposed to be spent on whatever Michael wrote,
Creation of.
creation. So I know for ULA, the city had established this, criteria, and people made applications to the city that were due like last week. And I guess they're gonna pick out from the applications of people how they're gonna allocate the money. Is there a thought of,
So we right now have a process like that for affordable housing development. Measure GS is not part of that. That could be something I think Vice Chair Amy might have in past conversations at this committee meeting, like asked about whether or not to call you out, sorry, Vice Chair. Whether or not to include Measure GS funds in the Housing Trust Fund over-the-counter process. That could be one option. Another option is utilizing this funding proposal. As if we did get an over-the-counter application, we could bring it to the Measure GS committee for their review and approval. Or, not approval, recommendation.
so this thing you gave us at the last meeting, that was the report from your team to the council, said the Housing Division has restarted the over-the-counter application process as of July 2025.
Correct.
So what's going on with that? People make applications and then you decide which ones you can.
Yeah, so we've had a long-standing, and Chair Michael, I believe when you were on the Housing Commission, you sat in some of those processes, but it's been a long-standing process of the city where as long as that housing development and that application fits the Housing Trust Fund guidelines, which our council approved, city staff can review those and approve those over the counters, meaning they don't have to go to city council. The city paused that during the COVID period, given our financial standings and other things like that, and we now have restarted it. There's not as much funding as we historically have had in it. We did receive one trust fund application, but there was not enough funds for it, even with Measure GS for the funding request. And so we haven't received any additional housing trust fund applications to date, but it is open. And I can go through how the process works is there's an application that's on the website. Folks, developers can apply for it, filling out that application. It's reviewed by city staff, which is then presented to a loan committee, and that loan committee just determines whether or not to move forward with that based off of the housing trust fund criteria and other factors.
And you're saying that if applications go into that, the staff might decide, well, this would be a good GS opportunity, and you'll bring it before our committee and we'll think about it and then recommend it to the council, and the council can approve or not approve.
Correct, because right now the Measure GS funds are not part of the Housing Trust Fund guidelines, so that would, unless there's a change in those Housing Trust Fund guidelines, that would need council approval.
And if you only got one application when you opened it up, why isn't it more than that?
There's a lot. There's not a lot of funds. I think also it's really competitive right now. The developers that we are working with are working on city-owned sites, and we right now just have $2 million, and that's not a lot for affordable housing development.
I would just say that given that report, the numbers are out in public. People who do this know it's in the housing trust fund, and they know that it's not a good use of their time.
Hopefully.
But then it makes sense to either tell people that there's GS money that can supplement it or set up a separate GS process so that people know there's money there to be had.
But I would also say too, the city owns sites that are through the housing element. We're right now going through that negotiation process, and those include the Bergamot Art Station, which is the city has committed to 707 housing units on that site. There's 4th, 5th Arizona, which the city through the housing element committed to 331, I believe. And then there's also parking structure 1 that was not identified in the housing element, but that was part of it. And so those are huge endeavors that likely are gonna need some sort of investment from the city in addition to the housing, in addition to the land.
Are you done, Bert?
Yeah, the way ahead, my next question.
So, half of 38 million right now, is that correct? So,
So
Almost
can I just
almost-
say something, guys? This item is about this process. We do have an item talking about whether we have views about how the money ought to be spent. That's coming later. So let's keep our comments at this point to the process issue.
that's what I'm trying to
Okay.
see
I just
if
wanna
we
be
have to
sure.
follow this process, or if we could have a measured GS process that goes outside of this, if they're not having a lot of work done because they don't have money in these funds. I mean, Measure GS has $19 million that it could use towards funding a building, affordable housing, and finding prospective builders, and that's.
So this process is about if staff wants to come to us with they have a proposal to spend the GS money, what are they going to do? That's was mentioned
So
in
if-
response to Mark's question. We also independently at any time can make our own recommendations to staff, to council, how we want to do it, about what ought to be done, and in fact, that's an agendized item for discussion later tonight. Obviously, in addition, anybody in the world could go directly to city council and say anything they want to the city council members, and if they choose to do it, they'll have anything they want.
So what are we doing?
So what we're doing right now is talking about whether this proposal about when staff has its ideas about how it wants to spend the GS money, do we consider this an appropriate procedure by which for that to happen? I think that's what this agenda item is about.
We
So-
don't really have much of a voice in it. Okay.
Well, no, the way it's set up is that they will tell us about it. They're gonna, a week in advance, give us certain information. There's a template
It's on the back.
on the back of what information they'll give us. Then we'll have a meeting about it. If we think we know enough at that meeting, we can say we like it, you know, we would support it to city council, we don't support it to city council, we said we support it, if it's changed in some way or whatever it is, or we could say, you know what, in order to decide, we'd like to have some additional information. And we can have up to 2 meetings, so then they would come back, and then at that point, it would we'd either take a position or they would be free, if we didn't take a position, to just go to council saying that they had adequately consulted with the, you know, Metro GS Resident Oversight Committee. So that's what's being proposed. And it's just about that issue, that when staff generates its own ideas about how to do it, how do we play a role in between their coming up with the idea and going to city council? So, long.
Yeah, I have a question about the presentation that we had last month from HPI. We learned that there was already some GS funding going towards staffing and programming, I think, within that new group. How was that decided before we all came on board? And then how is that practice going to be changing now that this group is a little bit more robust?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that those were, all of those were city council approved. The FFA and right to counsel, sorry, FFA is the Flexible Financial Assistance Program, and the right to counsel program. Those were council directions, that is what is under the council agenda as a 16 item, that council had asked staff to create this program. And staff created the program and then brought it back to council before this committee was set up. How that would differ is, in that scenario, even if council gave us the direction to create the program, staff would come back to this committee and provide the presentation on the program or the proposal before going back to council.
Okay, and then we would just have our say on whether or not that was good or not, and then council has that information to move forward with.
Correct, or any revisions also.
Sure.
And that, this would be, I would hope, a collaborative,
Yeah.
also not, staff-only direction.
Right.
Vice Chair King.
Natalie, you gave a couple of examples when you were describing what the process would be. Are those, is there kind of a list that staff is putting together right now of ideas that they want to bring to us? Or you're just putting this process in place just in case, or just curious?
I don't know if there's necessarily a written down list, but there's definitely, there's been talks in the community about a pod, preserving our diversity 2.0, that I know our human services division would be really excited about moving that forward if Measure GS was allowed for that. For housing, there's a lot of changes going on in the federal government, I think we're all aware of, that could potentially have some impacts on not only our voucher participants, but our COC holders, our voucher holders, that, something our division has talked about doing is maybe creating what was done during redevelopment, when redevelopment went away and there was a handful of tenant-based rental assistance participants, that there was a voucher preservation program. So if there was something that was impacted, for example, COC might be impacted, those households would maintain housing stability through a Measure GS funded program or something. And same with home, which is, I was telling Bruce earlier about that, that's always been on the chopping block and continues to be on the chopping block, and that, might also be another way to preserve tenancy for those participants.
I'm gonna call on myself first and then I'll go back to the list. So a couple of things. One is, obviously to the extent, let me step back, because we just heard about the money, not surprising. There's only so much, it's very variable and all of that. And when you spend on one thing, it forecloses spending on anything else. So if there is a series of ideas, for example, it would be helpful to know, not just to get an idea, but to know what are the other competing possibilities that are out there. I recognize certain things will only be created in different time, but if, for example, staff's thinking about a whole menu of possible options, already listening to it, it's gonna far exceed my understanding of probably what money we have, particularly given that city council already spent the first year's money for everything other than, housing. Anyway, so to the extent that's possible, it'd be helpful, or even, and even if we start talking about our own ideas of that, even if it's not fully baked at that time, it would be helpful when we have those discussions to hear. These are some of the other things that we've thought about, because it's not just the merits of the individual program, it's the merits of the individual program weighed against the other possible uses of the money. And to that, and slightly different from that, in the template, if we can, I'm not quite sure how this be, but the point being, which bucket is being coming from, how much money is in that bucket, and the like, so that we know that, are we, is this going to exhaust all the money that we have in a certain bucket, or is it a part of that, et cetera. So if there's a way to incorporate that information that's brought to us, so that we can understand how it fits into what's already, what's available, and And then the last,
one question on that.
Sure.
What would be the committee's preference? Are we calling them categories, buckets? Just out of curiosity,
What do we call them?
Categories?
Sure, let's call them categories.
categories, okay.
Seems a little more formal than a bucket.
Yeah.
Just wanted to check
We'll,
before I put it
we'll
down.
probably
in
end
my
up
notes.
calling them buckets in the meeting, but probably.
Formally, we'll call
report
them.
and what we're giving the city council, we probably ought to call it categories.
We have to vote on that.
And just in connection with that, obviously, you know, as we've mentioned before, and I don't know where we are, but just so everybody's clear, whatever's going to administration comes off the top, and then the 50% minimum to the creation bucket or whatever we're calling it. Sorry, the category of the housing creation is of the 94% or whatever it is, and then the 30% minimum for that, and then the other 20 is what can be moved around among other things. And then the last comment I had was that I appreciate here the quarterly updates on the status of the GS funded programs. And because this sort of goes to, you know, Milan's question about things that happened before we were involved. The only money, as far as I can tell so far, although we're going to be talking about that, that's been spent, is for these 2 administrative positions. But it also sounded to me, from the discussion, and perhaps I'm wrong, and the quarterly update will do it, is that most of the work being done by those 2 people is not to implement any Measure GS program, because the only Measure GS program there are right now is the standing up the eviction defense program and standing up the flexible funds, and that didn't sound like that was what those 2 folks are doing, so there seems to be a mismatch between what the administrative portion is supposed to be for and what those folks are actually doing, and we can, I guess, address that in the context of a quarterly report on what they're doing.
Can I do a quick correction?
Sure.
The HPI is now overseeing the Right to Counsel program, which is Measure GS funded.
I understand that, but the work of the 2 positions that we funded didn't appear to be, you know, spending full-time 2 people on the only 2 things that Measure GS is supposed to fund right now, which is standing up the eviction defense and doing that. So maybe, you know, 1 hour a month or whatever, those folks things is supervising the other people. Now, if it's the question that, okay, we have other people who are doing that work and we're sort of cross doing it or something, but it would be important to know what the money that's actually been spent, what that's actually doing that implements a Measure GS program. A, because that's how the law is written, and B, because one of the functions of this committee is to be able to tell people who monitor that we've been looking and making sure that the money is being used the way it's set forth in the statute. And regardless of whether or not the city council voted to do it that way or not, that's something that we at least have to weigh in on with that. But I think this quarterly reporting would allow us to do that. So other than those comments, I think this is a really excellent proposal, which I appreciate you guys developing, and we'll be ready to support if we have to take a vote on it, or how we're doing it, or whatever. So now, it's your next.
So to comment on Milan's point, the council adopted in March at the request of the staff to spend some GS money, but they haven't done it yet. So we'll get a report later on the status of how the staff is implementing the flexible financial assistance, the right to counsel.
Right, so they have hired the people.
They did spend money on hiring people, but that's it. So it was kind of, seemed to me that the council thought, we don't want to be accused of not spending the GS money. So staff presented a report saying, hey, let's spend it this way, and then the council approved. But staff said it will take 12 to 18 months to set up the program to actually do it. So we're still in that 12 to 18 month period. And so aside from the staff hiring, it hasn't been spent. And then I just have a question, picking up on what implementation or something like that. It doesn't have to be, we're gonna start a new program from scratch, that's the GS program. Because you guys have so many different programs, you always tell us that the money here is drying up and we have more money here, and it should be okay for you to say, we don't need a new program, a new GS program. We could use some of this money to accelerate some of the things that are already underway.
So what I'm hearing, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So I'm hearing from several members that a list of staff ideas or considerations would be beneficial. So I can definitely work with the divisions to get that. And to your point, Bruce, also including like if there's areas where Measure GS would be beneficial, where there's already a process, identifying that. So I can try and bring that back to the next meeting.
So the list of ideas doesn't have to be new ideas. It can be, hey guys, we have $20 million. We'd really like to accelerate one of these projects that's stalled. I mean, if you want to recommend to spend it there, I'd be happy to hear that.
I think actually Mark was next.
A couple of things. First, thanks for doing this. We appreciate the framework. It's very helpful. To Bruce's point, to other committee members' points, it would be helpful in the template when you talk about alignment with Measure GS priorities to talk about how it aligns with other initiatives in the city. Because if we're going to piggyback on another initiative, it would be really helpful to see how those interface and with realignment and all sorts of other things going on. I'm a big fan of harmonizing resources where we can. Something in the template that talks about how it assists those other initiatives or how it complements those other initiatives would be really helpful. And also, I'm a visual learner, so if we could get like a one-page graphic of how everything breaks out and where it goes, and 6% to administration, and those sort of things on one page, that would be really helpful.
Like a pie chart.
You got a table there.
Sorry.
We got a table early on, our first.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, but it has to be revised.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Vice Chair.
Can I just throw out an idea of not doing quarterly updates, but doing biannual updates? And I guess I raised that because I just wonder how much, I guess I would just say, I don't always like the amount of time that staff resources need to be invested in compiling and presenting information. Where I have, staff actually doing things. So that's one reason to shift from quarterly to biannual. And I guess I'm just curious, I guess it depends on the program, whether there's actually just gonna be that much information reported, quarter by quarter, as opposed to, every 6 months. Just thought I'd throw that in.
Are we throwing out ideas?
If you're raising your hand, you
Can you comment on my,
Okay.
let's look at, find about my first.
I think we should use 1% of to hire a manager to get all the information and to move us forward faster. I mean, I understand you saying to use the staff. So why not one person who is totally dedicated to Measure GS and that manages getting all the information from all the different places and answers to this committee and so that we can be on top of everything. Because, I mean, if we're gonna take 5 years, that's very disappointing to me. So whatever we can do to move us forward, and I think by using 1% of that 6% to hire a manager, that'll be.
Okay, Lon.
To Wade's point and Vice Chair Amy's
question about this biannual. I kind of am curious what staff would feel about those kinds of things. Like, how easy is it to make a report, and can it just be printed and included in our updates? Does someone need to physically be present to explain it to us or not? Like, what's the detail or work requirements for staff to be providing these quarterly updates is one question. Then the other question that's larger, and I think maybe something we could spend time on, and I think you've talked about this last meeting, which is like, is our goal to stand up new, innovative, exciting programs, or is our goal to just keep balls rolling that are already whatever?
I think there are electric, shades.
Yeah. Yeah, they're electric. That's a good thought, though, whoever said that.
It's just this one.
Oh, it didn't work right here. Oh,
Is it just us?
hello? Hey, Brian.
Well,
How exciting.
something new happens at a meeting. Ready?
No.
Oh, well,
Right. It's a power outage.
here's another meeting.
No way. Meeting by midnight it is.
I guess you can add this to our,
I still would rather meet here than the parking lot building.
I agree, this is a much more pleasant room. It definitely feels like we're being shoved into the absolute bottom of the barrel. We have to make that.
Should we see what we could all do with our phone lights?
we could do it that way.
Yeah, I don't see why we can't continue.
It's like, I can turn my computer brightness.
Yeah, I have a computer here that's turning on.
Campfire.
Did somebody say there was a power outage?
So there was supposedly a scheduled power outage that no one told anyone about. So it's supposed to last 3 to 4 hours.
So I,
This does not look good, Santa Monica.
That's for sure.
So apologies, everyone.
Clearly not. I just want to see if there's any temporary lighting. I can use. Yeah, it's just speakers.
I wonder if the programs that help the rich are going through this process.
We have programs now?
Yeah, they're programs.
There are plenty of programs. that help the
Yeah,
rich.
it's called,
It's called mortgage interest and more about preservation of funds and not paying taxes.
no, there are affirmative things such as farm subsidies.
Of course. The rich people are doing quite fine in this country. Broke another record on Wall Street, just.
So this is more mood lighting than anything that's gonna help us out.
All right, are we going to continue with
by
this?
candlelight.
Are we planning to continue, Chairman?
What do people feel?
I'm fine.
I'm fine with it.
Continue.
I mean, we might as well get it over with.
Yeah.
We're close to the end anyways.
Yeah.
Recently, yeah.
This is just temporary. It's our other location
It's
is
gonna come
being
back
used
in
for
4
voting,
hours,
so we'll be back.
still be here.
Let's see what.
We'll be back in our normal location next month.
Mhm.
Yes.
Up at the candles. This is the emergency lighting,
Well, this is what I'm finding in the dark anyway. Let's see.
I don't
Just
think that's necessary, but if you want to do it.
Okay. Let's see. What else we got?
It's like
I think
We
everybody
we all
is
have
okay.
phones, so
Yeah,
I think we
that's
can, Thomas, I think
Okay.
we're okay with
I
that.
appreciate the ambiance.
Yes, it's romantic. It's very romantic.
Can I pause to?
Okay.
Ready to go?
Ready?
You guys have good power on your computers.
Okay, although we're experiencing a power outage, the committee is going to continue on with its work. So we were on item 13B, sub little I, which is a report from our committee on the flexible financing, right to council programs, and Bruce is going to give us whatever updates he wishes to give us.
So there's a rule that if you give someone a 3-day notice that they have to leave their house, or if you file an unlawful detainer action, you have to tell the city attorney that you're doing it. And so it's a belief that there's underreporting, that the numbers that I'm about to give you are just show a fraction of the problem. But for this calendar year, there have been 102 unlawful detainers filed with the city attorney's office and 594 3-day notices. So it's, roughly 2 unlawful detainers a week and a 3-day notice every day. And 75% of those are for non-payment of rent, and the amounts are less than $5,000. So this is consistent with what was in the statements in favor of Measure GS, to say that lots of people get evicted, that they're being evicted for not that much money, and if GS funds could be used to help people pay rent for a month, that might stop evictions. And at least in the Fetterman-Dunn report, it says it can reasonably be inferred that 70% of the tenants who receive a 3-day notice may need only a one-time payment to stave off an eviction file. And 80% of the 3-day notices are for less than $5,000. So it's just to say that what Fetterman-Dunn said about 2023, those circumstances exist today in 2025 based on the work that we did. And we're trying to get the numbers from the county, the actual number of unlawful detainers that are filed. But at the time of the Fetterman-Dunn report, I just told you they had 100 in the city attorney's office. The Fetterman-Dunn report thought there were 600 a year filed for our zip codes. So that there's massive underreporting, but we'll get the numbers from the county to actually know how many unlawful detainers. And then you can look at those and see why people are being evicted and how much money they owe. And that's sort of a way of keeping our finger on the pulse of that the problem exists, and that it's, in some respects, it's a very solvable problem given how small the numbers are.
How many, did you say a year, or is that?
Well, for 2025, in the city attorney's office, they have 102.
Okay.
But in the court data that Fetterman-Dunn had showed 236 for 6 months in 2023. And so they doubled that and said they're probably like 470 a year.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what Fetterman-Dunn thought about 2023, and they had similar information from the city attorney's office. So we're trying to drill down to say whether that's a good number to be using for 2025. But the number that we know is that 102 were in the city attorney's office. Which is all to say that the problems that were identified when the measure was put on the ballot and identified in Fetterman-Dunn continue, that there are people who are being evicted on a regular basis, and for the non-payment of rent is a relatively small number given the size of the money that's coming in for Measure GS. And then Natalie has an update on.
Hang on 1 second before we move back and come on that question.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Natalie will touch on it, but it sounds like the new programs that aren't fully up and fortified yet would really well address what you're talking about. Is that correct?
Yes.
That $5,000 is really, like, cause what was it, it's like a $10,000 amount that you can borrow and stuff like that?
The new programs.
Right, that aren't up yet, that'll take 12 to 18 months, right?
Should address this. The
Okay.
question is whether given that the measure passed 3 years ago,
Right,
if we could get money from the bucket or the category into people's
yeah,
hands like
sooner,
yesterday.
right,
And so Natalie has some updates on that. There is the Social Services Flex Fund that is operating today, and is
Okay.
helping people today. And there's some other programs that are already in existence. So it's not that people are going without, but it's helpful, I think your report will be helpful to tell people what's currently happening. And then the flexible financial assistance will build on that.
Yeah, thank you, Liz. So just to make sure, the Human Services Flex Fund, those are just for participants that are in the, that are already participants in programs that are funded by the HSGP, which is the Human Services Grant Program. So just some quick updates. The FFA, which is the Flexible Finance Assistance Program, the RFP by staff has been completed, so procurement's reviewing at that. And they'll let us know the timeline for posting it. They're aware it's a priority and they're expediting it. So once that RFP has been posted, we'll provide an update on that timeline, such as when the due date is, the award announcement, and the contract start date. Staff also did confirm that at least one member of the Measure GS committee can be an external rating of those proposals for the RFP. So we just wanted to share that if there are members that are interested. And then additionally, staff has been working with an agency to operate what we're calling either temporary or bridge FFA program. And so we're looking to staff's looking to enter into a short-term contract to provide FFA on a temporary basis until the permanent FFA is up and operational. I will note though, the great thing about Measure GS is that it is very flexible. And so there are funds that were outlined in the staff report that went in March that the city has to spend down by June 30th of this year. So that will be the priority in spending before Measure GS funds, which is the Pro Housing Incentive Program, also known as the PIP funds. So that was $1 million that was awarded to the city for flexible financial assistance programs. So that will be the priority to spend those funds before Measure GS is used for this temporary or bridge FFA program. And those are like staff.
So you said that the GS committee member could be work with them in some way?
No, so how the request for proposal process works, we have to follow the procurement process for that. It's usually internal reviewers that review the proposals, rate them, and then that's how that moves forward then to city council. But we've confirmed with procurement that a member of the GS committee can sit on that review panel to review all the proposals and provide the rankings of those. And how that would work is it would be the committee would nominate at least one member that would then sit on that review panel when the time came.
And who else are on the review panel?
City staff,
Just city staff?
correct.
No other city volunteers or?
You have to follow pretty strict procurement rules, so no members of the public can be part of it beyond the Measure GS committee.
So what do we need to do to send one of our members to that review, that committee?
I believe you would have to nominate someone and then vote as a committee.
First we'd have to agendize it.
You'd have to agendize
Which
it,
I
correct?
think we should do for next
And
month.
then
Yeah.
just the timeline, so procurement is gonna hopefully approve the RFP, and the RFP would go out maybe in the next 30 days.
Procurement's reviewing it, and once they're done with the review, it will be posted.
And then how long?
So once it's posted, we'll know that, I'll report back with the update on the timeline.
But when you, the posting will say people need to submit their applications, what, 60 days, 90 days, something like that?
Correct. So I don't know which one it is. There'll also be a required, bid conference where the bidders who are interested would have to go to a meeting to learn more about the opportunity.
And then can the staff approve, or does it have to go to council?
I believe that has to go to city council.
Yeah, so, particularly if it's being funded this way, right? Oh, yeah, go ahead, Jerry.
And so the temporary, bridge program, is that what you call it? Yeah, bridge. And so that program can be put together kind of outside of this regular procurement process because it's temporary or something like that? Is that how it's-
Yeah, so there is an agency who is an HSGP funded agency that operates a similar program, but is not identical, and is not using city funds for that we, city staff is having discussions with them about temporarily, funding a program through them to get us to the permanent stage.
I mean, I guess I would just say, I think that's fantastic to hear, right? Because I think, led in large part by Bruce, right? There's been a lot of urgency and frustration that it's gonna take so long to put the FFA program in place. So thanks for being responsive.
And Sam had set up a call with, Natalie's boss and with the city manager, which I think is set for November 12th
That is the 16th.
or 16th, whatever, sometime in November. Sam started sending emails on this before he was on the committee, so the call finally got scheduled, and some of this might be so they have some things in place by the time of the call, so it looks like they're doing something, I think. I mean, it's important to keep the pressure on that, given all the other priorities that the city has, this squeak wheel gets the grease a little bit, but on this one, it's time to move money from the GS funds to people who are being evicted, as soon as possible.
Mhm.
And it sounds like there's money that they're gonna lose unless they spend it, so that's.
And in the HRNA report on Measure GS, they have a section where they said that you need flexibility in picking people, and you can't make the eligibility criteria so rigid that, given that if you get a 3-day notice, you don't have a lot of time to start applying for funds, that there needs to be some ability to address things quickly. And I think that with the right to counsel that already exists, the legal aid kind of knows in real time who needs the money, and I think has the ability to tell the city, here's a person that needs the money. So it's good that that program is in place, and that they do call on the city on behalf of their clients, and the city does fund things. So there's an infrastructure in place, you're not starting from scratch.
Bruce, is it my understanding that the goal of getting this money to people is before they get this 3-day notice, so that it's not on their record? Because I was hearing something about the issue of like when, or maybe that was you talking about that. but-
So there's probably two different things we're talking about here. So
Yeah.
yes, this nature of these types of programs, part of it's supposed to be to try and find ways to intervene before people actually get eviction notices, because we've set the timeline. Once an eviction notice is issued, if you don't meet that timeline, then it's too late, unless you can somehow occasionally get a landlord to do it. But most of the time, they're evicting people because they can get more money out of the newer tenant based on the way state law works. But it's also necessary to have it for folks who come in and say they have a notice. And I guess one of the difficult questions, which obviously isn't part of this report, but whoever's sitting on and working with this RFP, responses and whatever, is how exactly do we communicate to the public
when the city of LA had a program under ULA, and they had money to help people, actually 20% of the applications came from landlords. Troy said, you know, this is the person behind, but I think they can catch up. But,
Oh, that's nice.
yeah.
Well, there's also a self-interest there.
Yeah.
Sure. No, because it depends whether, you know, without getting too much detail, if somebody's been a tenant for a really long time, so their car rent is very low because of rent control, you may make more money by raising it. If somebody's relatively recent and they're behind, it may take a long time for the landlord to make up that money, so they may be happier just getting the lump sum. They also, there are other complications because you can't
Eviction.
evict based on rent that was owed more than a year ago and all sorts of stuff. But that sounds like a really good report, and thank you. Thank your subcommittee for pushing so hard on this.
What is it?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Will we have more information on the incomes of the people and on the average income of those people being evicted or anything like that?
I don't know that you'd know from any of the reports that exist that, but there would have to be, and this will probably be in the RFP, some qualifying procedure to meet the criteria that are set out in GS, whatever it is, 80%.
120% of average. 120%, is that correct?
Or below, yeah,
Yeah, 120% below.
with priorities. Various
And
groups.
is there a priority?
There's priorities for
Sorry.
people with children, with disabled people, seniors, various things like that. And certainly, one of the things we could recommend at a time is that to the extent there isn't enough money to do all of this, you know, the people who are most financially at risk, meaning that they're not gonna end up in another housed situation, should have priority. But it sounds like, at least at the moment, you know, we may be able to put enough money into this program that we can help everybody. Okay, anything else on the report? We can talk a little bit about how we want to spend money when we get to that agenda item, but trying to differentiate between the report and our ideas about what to do on that. Okay, so then I can't, without getting into it, the next one is a report from the production subcommittee. I'm the only person here. I was thinking of going through, but I don't see a point under these circumstances of missing 4 people. Just accomplishing our goal of educating people's history about this, I guess I'll just say a couple of things that I think are important for people to know. The way the city has created the affordable housing, deed restricted affordable housing it has, is in a variety of ways, but the bulk of it has come in using city funds in combination with tax credit type financing to create new deed restricted affordable housing projects. We've used in the past, not so much recently, city funds to acquire existing properties, rehabilitate them, and have them deed restricted affordable housing. And we have an inclusionary housing program, meaning that we put requirements on developers to include in the projects that they're building a certain number of units that will be deed restricted affordable housing. And as a result of all of that, we're now probably approaching 5,000 such units in the city, which is pretty good. We're starting to get close to 10% of the housing stock. We're still below that, but we're getting there. But the big challenge has been that when the state ended, so step back, the big chunk of money that we came up with was actually after the Northridge earthquake, because the city our city a redevelopment area, which meant that the city was entitled to a portion of the increase in property taxes, and given how much real estate has appreciated in Santa Monica, that was actually a pretty substantial source of revenue. The state required during the time it had redevelopment that you must spend at least 20% of it on creating affordable housing. We should be proud of the fact that the city spent about 40% of those funds on creating affordable housing. In 2011, or 2012 is when they did it, so 2011 was the last year. Governor Brown, as a result of the Great Recession, decided that no more property tax revenue should be going to cities, so he ended the redevelopment program. In fairness, there were some other cities where the money was not well spent to do that, but it basically cut off all the funding the city had for that. We were getting, in 2011, like about $15 or $16 million a year, which may not sound like a huge amount, but if you gross that up population-wise to the state of California, that would be as if the state was spending more than $6 billion a year on affordable housing. We're nowhere near, no, even at the height, we've never spent anywhere near that at the state level. And that's what's led to these variety of efforts, both GS's, to come up with new funding sources to allow us to get back into that mode. And so here we are, hoping that the money will get there. And there's an interesting development that should be coming back to council and be formalized soon, so I'm told. But one of the things that's happened recently is that, as is happening everywhere, between the incredibly high interest rates, the increasing costs of materials, the problems with labor that are being exacerbated, both of those being exacerbated by policies of the current administration, and everything else, that there hasn't been a lot of activity in the creation of new multi-family housing. But so what the city did, and obviously the fact that we have Measure GS is yet another cost that comes into the model of that for some people. So the city has actually developed a new program, which will be finalized shortly, which will allow developers to create that affordable housing that they're obligated to create, not in the same building as the market rate housing, but in separate affordable housing projects. And that has certain economic benefits for them. Principal ones being that all of those units that were going to be affordable housing units are now market rate units, so the market rate project generates more revenue. The city's also made some changes to allow greater flexibility, to have more certainty into the timing of moving forward on that, and letting them take advantage of using tax credit financing as part of creating those units. What's of particular interest to this committee is that at least the developer who took advantage of the initial 1,000 slots in the program before it was extended to 4,000 slots. It's only for projects that have already been approved. It's not new projects, but we already have 4,000 units that were approved, including about 500 or so affordable housing units. That with these changes, they should be able to go forward, build their projects, sell their projects, and pay the GS taxes. Now, as I think I mentioned at a prior meeting, and people probably know, there are various efforts to eliminate GS and more, and other transfer taxes around California. There are efforts at the state level where various business and tax payer rights, the Howard Jarvis type people, they have a constitutional amendment that they're trying to gather enough signatures for to put on the ballot in 2026, which, if it were to pass, would say that unless you get a 2/3 vote in support of these taxes, within, I think it's 2 years of the passage of that measure, they have to go away. So that's one thing. In the legislature, there have been efforts to, exempt certain categories of property, including the construction of multifamily housing, from transfer taxes, such as GS, although they're really much more focused on Measure ULA, and there are some transfer taxes in San Francisco and San Jose, other big cities, where the real focus is. So that's a risk, and then of course there was a failed attempt to start a ballot measure to repeal Measure GS back in 2024. But one of the provisions that's going to be unrequired under this law is that if you want to take advantage of this program, you have to agree that whether Measure GS, you'll either pay Measure GS, or if it isn't there, then you're going to make a payment to the city in an equal amount anyway when you sell these properties. So this should put us in a position to be looking forward down the road. It'll still probably be another 5 years or whatever to much more robust years of funding, whether it technically be Measure GS, which I certainly hope it will be, or it be some other payment to the city so that there will be a significant funding to do all of the things, including the production of new affordable housing.
I'm curious, so the policy, that it sounds like city council hasn't approved, but about.
They have approved, they gave direction to staff, and they're just bringing back
The final.
the written product.
And so the idea is that to get them over their financing thresholds, they're gonna be allowed to do their inclusionary housing off-site and use tax credits to be able to finance those projects?
Yes, and it's more complex than that, but yes.
So I guess my question is, are they also being given access to city loan resources, like just,
No.
just the tax credit?
Yes.
Yeah. But they're also, one of the options is also just paying an in lieu fee instead of building.
I actually think that one was suspended after the first one.
Okay.
The direction, so there was sort of an initial thing, and because the council sort of, without getting into all the politics of it, rushed it through, and then when it came back a month later, there were some significant changes made to the program, one of which was that they were not going to allow the in lieu fee payment to go, since there was a serious question by various people, including myself, about whether that had been set at an appropriate
Yeah, I guess
level. So that the key one is.
yeah, I guess relevant to us, I just wanted to
Yeah.
try and understand again, like, what's the possible list of places where we need to be thinking about allocating money, so it doesn't sound like
Yeah.
supporting these off-site inclusionary.
What's relevant to us is the inflow of money, because transactions that will either be subject to the tax or will be subject to this alternative payment of an equivalent amount of money for the privilege of being allowed to do this project. And this is something that I know Vice Chair Amy understands at least as well, if not better than me, but for the others, right now, the way these projects are done, they go to sort of the maximum of our local zoning in terms of height, density, that kind of thing. And then they take advantage of the state density bonus law, which allows them, depending how they do their inclusionary housing, to go either another 50% above that, or now even 100% above it, to double the size of that. But state law requires you to do it on site. So you have no choice to do that. So what we've done is created a local density bonus program that recreates what the state law will allow, that these projects have already taken advantage of, but we are letting them move the affordable housing units off-site to a different location, and basically 100% affordable build in the city, and to take part in, I believe, the 4% tax credit programs. I think it's actually limited to the 4% tax credits. It doesn't require that they have to have built the affordable housing before they can get their certificates of occupancy on the market rate housing, so that gives them certainty in that project. And there are various provisions in there, but one of the ultimate net benefits to the city, and they have to deposit a certain amount of money to escrow, and they have to give title to a piece of land into an escrow so that there is land, and there's a certain amount of money, at least for building it, if they were to walk away. But one of the critical financial things, which is directly relevant to this committee, is the fact that, if we can successfully unlock these projects and they move forward, as long as GS is in place, that's gonna be a significant source of revenue to the homelessness prevention and affordable housing fund.
But not necessarily something we need to think about for the allocation of the dollars.
No, this is for just that that we should be looking, if this works, we should be looking to better times ahead than what we've been seeing the last few years, in terms of transactions and revenue. And on top of that, we've bought ourselves an insurance policy that if all of these political efforts to remove this, so that we no longer have that source of revenue, at least for these projects, which is still gonna generate a substantial amount of money, there will be meaningful money that we'll be able to use for these types of programs, at least until that, hopefully the political machinations will not succeed. But if they do, we have an insurance policy that doesn't mean that we're completely shutting up shop here in 2 years.
Are there projections anywhere for how many units, new units, go online each year? Affordable and market rate?
The only thing that I've heard is what was reported at the council meeting, is that the person who did the developer who was, put 5 projects for close to 1,000 units into the initial program, was expecting that it would, in 5 years, is when they would have succeeded in constructing and selling those projects. And they were estimating that if all of the projects that they had went forward, that was 1,700 units. I think they said something like $120 million would be generated by the 5% sales tax, but it's not 1,700 units. This is a developer who had the Gelson's project, which they are no longer pursuing. Now, I'm sure somebody else will pursue that someday, but that's not in the pipeline at the moment, the way these other projects appear to be.
And is this on top of the stuff that's happening on Wilshire, or is this some of that included, like on 26th and Wilshire?
There's a list. It's on, there's an actual, city webpage that reports which projects it is,
The dashboard.
to your transparency, right, point, there is a dashboard for that available online, and shows you the addresses and all this kind of stuff.
I wouldn't say it's that transparent, but yeah, it's there. So did you have any update? I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, I'm wondering if we've strayed from the topic.
Well, I was giving a report of this
Okay.
subcommittee, and I
Sure.
think that's relevant to the report of the subcommittee, which is how we create affordable housing, and how the creation of housing is gonna finance, the production of housing is gonna finance the creation of affordable housing in Measure GS. Okay, so I think we're now on, what is it?
13P?
Which is our, are we gonna be doing anything about committees tonight and appointing members or all that stuff? I don't think so.
I mean, I guess the question is whether Milan and Mark are interested in joining any of the existing committees, right?
Yeah.
there's more work to be done on them, that you could use more people, sure, but, kind of still getting the land, so if there's something that.
We're gonna keep this on every agenda, so if you don't know tonight that you wanna do that, you can do it next month. Or if you have ideas for a new committee, that's also agendized here. And I don't probably see us doing that tonight, but if people wanna discuss that, they can. I think the big one,
Towards the end?
Hmm? We're now at the thing that matters to you, I shouldn't say matters to you. That where what you were talking about earlier is the appropriate place, which is we
We're
can
here?
discuss how we're gonna spend money.
We're here.
Oh, good.
So, Wade, I'm gonna let you go first.
Thank you. I've made many suggestions during this period of time to put some things on the agenda, and I haven't seen any of these things show up on the agenda, and I'm very disappointed. I mean, I would think that at
Which
least,
things are you referring to?
Sorry, are we on, we're on discussion of possible action on making recommendations to city council to spend money.
Right. That's what I thought we were on.
Yeah,
Yeah, not on the agenda.
we're not on that. I think
Oh,
we're
I
going
thought you had ideas about how to spend money. The next one is where we talk about
oh,
future agendas.
how to spend money, I mean, yeah, I do, but that's, I don't know if this is something that we're going to put on an agenda for the next, on how to spend money.
You can talk about it right now, it's on this agenda.
Well, we talked about, the small houses, small modular things, about the beach land, city land. I won't even, so I'm waiting to talk about the airport rebuke of the committee, I mean, the city council, on the next, that comes up on the next thing, is that right? Okay. But I haven't seen anything about that on any of the agenda. The
Talk about it right now.
modular housing, the city property, the beach property, any of those sorts of things.
This is your opportunity right now.
Buying up motels in Santa Monica. I mean, we've talked about many of these things. I don't see them come up and when we get back here. I mean, I don't,
So, wait,
yes.
this is the agenda item to talk about spending money, but just saying buy up motels or whatever, do you have a specific proposal you want the rest of us to think about?
Also, I'd just like to say, this is why the mission statement is helpful. I mean, I don't wanna be telling the city council what to do on the airport, that's not what this committee's for. So, no one,
Guys,
can do whatever they
hang
want.
on, hang on. We're gonna get to future agenda items and debate about the airport and what the city should do
Okay.
there can come up there. This is about spending the GS money, which is clearly within, that is the core mission of this committee, is recommendations about that. So
Exactly.
you have specific
We have talked.
ideas of what you
And-
think we ought to
and-
do.
Point of order, Mr.
And-
Chairman, within the confines of the statute, we can't just say, I wanna, build a daycare center because I think that's a good idea. The
Absolutely.
statute, as was written by you, really restricts what the money is to go for.
Correct.
And it's flexible within certain categories, helping people stay housed, creating more housing, but that's it. So it isn't really meant to be addressing the homeless problem in Santa Monica. That's not what the money was supposed to be for. There's other money.
Prevention, right.
Prevention.
Creating housing, it will help homelessness, and, I mean, buying up some of these hotels and building there, I mean, what,
So if you're
are
talking about
renovating
acquiring-
commercial property, or,
Acquiring and rehabilitating
Mhm.
hotels into deed restricted affordable housing, that would fit, in my opinion, within the language of the statute. To me, the questions are, what actually is available in Santa Monica? cost to do that? What would we be able to serve in order to do that? And how does that, spending it in those ways compare to other ways of creating restricted affordable housing?
Exactly.
So that's the information we would need, in my mind, before anyone could make a decision about whether that would be a good idea. I mean, presumably, if we could build tiny houses somewhere, and those were also deed restricted affordable housing, it would qualify, again, within the statute. The same question would be, who could we serve, how much would it cost, where would it go, and how does that compare to the alternative expenditures of the money? So it sounds to me like you're interested in those ideas, but the question then becomes, how would we develop that kind of information to know if that is an appropriate, or sorry, not appropriate is the right word, if it's something that we as a committee wanted to recommend or not recommend to the city council.
All right, there's that.
So let me ask, I don't know if you know any of this, I think we didn't the city do something during COVID like LA did vis-a-vis? Wasn't there at least one motel in the city that was acquired?
No, there wasn't one that was acquired for home key, is that what you're referring to?
Well, sort of the equivalent of it, yeah, because obviously we're not the city of LA.
Well, home key is a state program.
Oh.
Yeah, and so the city hasn't acquired, I think there was a partnership with the county for another program, and I wasn't involved in that one, the housing wasn't involved, but that was, for homeless, like, an interim housing site, that is still operating today. I can't recall the name of it though.
American Motel, is that?
No, I don't know, the hotel itself is not a disclosed location, but there was a site that the city was involved in, and I think through the county. I'd have to get more information on that. And then in the past, the city has, like with Step Up on Second, there was a motel conversion that was done, I think in the early 2000s, that is still operating today, that's called Daniel's Village. It's on, I want to say Wilshire, but that doesn't sound right. And that is operated for young adults. That is permanent housing for young adults that were either homeless or at risk of homelessness. And that was a hotel conversion. And then I believe there's maybe one other hotel conversion that has happened in the city's history that I'm aware of.
I was only asking in the hope that perhaps the city had already surveyed what exists in the city, but if not, then.
That'd be great if we had.
Well, if they,
Yeah.
But if not, then.
I'll also speak from my past experience, because in my other jurisdiction I was in, we did a number of hotel conversions, and in Santa Monica at least, it has to be a willing buyer to, be able to do those hotel conversions, and then the property, the land value itself is pretty expensive because of the highest and best use that's associated with it. But there's nothing right now that precludes a developer who wants to do deed restriction in acquiring a hotel or a motel and doing, a conversion project or even building deed restricted. In fact, the Home Key program, which is through the states, there is incentives for doing those type of programs.
What if somebody wanted to do that? Let's assume that the 40 million or so that was siphoned off of the Housing Trust Fund to pay off the Euler victims was either returned or had never been taken. And so there was money there. Could such a person put in an application would it fit within the Housing Trust Fund guidelines or not?
Would it be like a conversion into permanent housing, or would it be?
Oh.
Or would it
I assume that's what
be
you're talking about.
interim housing?
Whatever's available, we have the ability to move forward.
If it was
I mean, the whole idea is to move these things forward, I would hope.
I think if it was financially feasible, not only constructing it, but also operating it, knowing that many of these hotel conversions, if they're turned into permanent supportive housing, needs the project-based vouchers from the housing authority, which those are very limited. It could potentially have received, or could receive still, housing trust fund dollars if it was financially feasible.
Have you ever received any of those?
Since I've been with the city,
I guess it's the.
oh, you know what? Yes, when I first started at the city in 2017, I believe, I think that was the first development I underwrote, was for, I believe it was a hotel, and it was not a bid.
Because we didn't have the money, or because there were better uses of the money?
It was, there was other concerns with it. That was from 2017, pre-COVID. I don't know the exact reasons, but it was not that we didn't have the money.
Again, the only reason I'm asking is whether we can gather any information about the utility of, this particular approach to creating affordable housing from past experience or not, but it sounds like it's hard to tell.
Yeah, I think the other thing I would add too, and Vice Chair Amy might know more about this, but the Home Key Fund staff has reviewed those when, we've actually been not awarded, but, have a partnership with the county if we were to identify anything, but the time to utilize those funds is very constraining, at least in Santa Monica, for identifying a site and moving a site forward. That's been the challenge in that. And I don't know, Amy, if you have any experience with the Home Key funds.
I mean,
Why we need
the
to
whole
push.
program has changed to Home Keep Plus, right? And then
Yeah.
it's much more focused on mental health and.
I have a question, maybe a comment, thinking about, ways, different ideas of what can be done with this money and connecting it to this proposal. On a template, I'm wondering if there's something that we can be doing to notify people that already do this work that we have money and we'd like to give it, like, for example, CCSM, like, is there something we can do to get people to make proposals to us, rather than us spend our time coming up with our own ideas without, none of us do this, so that's not really our area of expertise, because we can envision as many things as possible, but is there a way that we can reach out to existing entities that are already doing this stuff and get them to ask us for money so we can say yes? Yeah.
Can I?
Sure, go ahead. I'll comment after you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a great idea. I think that, like, because I was kind of thinking the same thing, right? Which is like, Wade has this whole series of different strategies to try and get affordable housing built. So instead of maybe saying, let's allocate the GS housing production dollars, like specifically to hotels or to specifically to modular, we could kind of, again, come up with criteria, like, I don't know, like innovation or like, I don't know, we could even provide these examples that we want to prioritize GS production dollars being spent towards these types of, like, I don't know, new and different approaches. But I think, Malala, one thing I would say is like, I don't think those proposals should come to us, right? That I think our role is to say to City Council, is to recommend to City Council to allocate these dollars to the city staff, right? And the city staff would do exactly what you said, like, let community members and developers know that these resources exist and that these are the types of projects that they're seeking. I'm just gonna take a moment to say, like, I think it's really important that projects don't come to us, right? Like, like our responsibilities are related to like programs and program outline. I don't think of it as like, we're gonna look at a project.
But, right, I think that's obviously correct. One of the points of having administration is if another person needs to be hired to, do administrative work and evaluating and all of that kind of stuff beyond what the city already has for these projects to do it. I'll just say, though, that I think that we have to, that is one of the things we're going to, is criteria, what is it we're trying to do? I mean, so Wade has raised some possibilities, for myself. So first of all, if we have a bottleneck timing problem, whatever it may be, that, since we already have some money in hand, maybe we'll decide that, it should go to whatever the staff's gonna come up with as a proposal to supplement and whatever, but in the longer term, at least for me personally, I am of the view that the point of all of this is not simply to throw some more dollars into what we've always done, because what we've always done, in terms of the production of housing is incredibly expensive. In terms of resources, so this is one reason why so much of the money, the minimum, has to go to either ongoing or, we've been talking about emergency funding, but the measure contemplates ongoing too. And when the staff comes to us with ideas about expanding pod to other groups and all that, I'll be all in on that and show you some of the economics of that. But the other is finding ways to make the production more cost effective. And there are ideas about, hotels or modular, all those things, but based on what I've seen, that's most more at the margins. The idea that most interests me is the social housing model. How do we do projects where we have people who are above what qualifies for tax credits and all of that in there, so that they're also cross-subsidizing. Some people have started looking at the economics of that in connection with the airport or whatever. I've yet to see some meaningful data from anybody about what that would involve, but the idea of having, social housing where you have people of higher means as well as people of lesser means living together, which in and of itself meets my personal social ideas, but more importantly, can allow us to have less public subsidy in order to create these things. And that's something we talk about ULA. That's one of the things that they have as one of their programs to try and look at that. I very much like to see that, but I think to stand up to anything like that, or even these other things we're talking about, is probably going to take a while. And so, I'm being persuaded that in the short run, let's spend things on that, and in the long run, look to stand up some things that are testing whether there are ways to do this in a more cost-effective manner. So that's my own sort of overview. It's not like I'm prepared to vote on something tonight on that, but that's sort of where I'm coming from. Wade, you're next.
Well, see, that's the problem. If we left it up to the city and the staff, I mean, it's going the wrong direction. Things are getting more expensive. They're arresting more homeless people and poor people on the streets, and they're taking thumbprints from people that are digging through the garbage. They're putting locks on the public garbage cans because they don't want poor people to be going through for whatever reason. I mean, the public garbage can, most people don't put
We're talking
personal
about how this
information.
money's going to be spent.
And I'm saying, you're saying that we shouldn't say where it should go specifically. We should let the staff do their job and just, okay, whatever. I mean,
That's not what I said.
Okay, I'm sorry. When do we get to the point where we can talk about the other stuff then?
The other stuff being what, the other agenda items, is that?
I suppose so.
Okay.
I just wanted to, on Milan's point, given, I don't think we should look at what the city of LA is doing and think that it's a a model for us, it may be a model of how not to do it. But they had the deadline, I think it was last Tuesday, for people to make submissions on how to spend the ULA money. And so we can look between now and the next meeting just to see how many people applied and what the numbers are, and they had criteria. But the idea of saying to the world, there's money, you can apply for it, and that's what they're doing with the ULA money, at least some of it, to see what comes in the door.
Yeah.
At the staff level,
Say that again?
right, it's like the staff.
Their oversight
Yeah.
commission, or whatever they call it there, is not the ones who's sent out the RFP or is receiving the RFP.
Right, I'm just saying, it's not out of our jurisdiction to suggest that a process be set up for receiving, we just learned today that there is no process for applications from the GS money. And so that could be an idea that we think would be good for people to think about.
Great.
Right, and one possibility of that is the one that was discussed earlier today, simply saying there's already a process and criteria and all of that set up that the city's been doing for the RFPs it sent out for all of the public sites, for the Fifth and Arizona parking structure one and further
Right.
on, which we've committed to 1,000 affordable housing units in the housing element. So it may be the things to say, yeah, here, you have this additional, whatever we decide it is right now that you can use for that. Or another alternative is to say, we already have a process by which people can come in and ask for a loan from the city to do an affordable housing project not on city land, which is how most of the affordable housing that is an inclusionary has been built in the city to date, and say, instead of the 2 million that you have, here's whatever the number is we figure out is the right thing that we have that could go into that. And then that would,
So moved.
they would immediately know that, so that's a possibility. So it's very easy to just, to say it's available for what, is I think the question. And that's, I think staff is already trying to be thinking about that, and what I was trying to say, which maybe was misunderstood, or maybe I misunderstood it in the same way, that could easily be. What I was saying is that long term, over the next 5 or 10 years, I'm not looking to spend all this money by just doing the same old stuff that we've been doing here. I'm looking for us to use this to try and explore some other models to see if there are more cost-effective ways to do it. One of which I know the city of LA is looking at, and we had all these people from our city council go to Vienna, which quite frankly I thought was unnecessary to understand social housing, but they did it. And this is sort of an Alex Lee's been pushing for in the legislature. Can't get it funded there, but by doing something to try and set that up, because that seems like a way of meaningfully drawing in other types of funding besides simply the existing tax credits and public tax money, which is just not going to be adequate to the scope of the need we need. But because we're not, it's not like, 3 meetings from now, we're going to be ready to say, oh, here's how we do this. It may very well be in the shorter term that we could say this money that we have here right now ought to go to one of these other purposes that the city's already doing as a buttress for. So that's what I was trying to say. Go ahead, Vice Chair.
It's great, because I very much agree, right? Like, I hear a ton of, like, I hear frustration from Bruce, right, that we passed this measure and the funds have been gathering, but the funds haven't been spent. And I think there is this interest in trying to use, in particular, the housing production money in kind of a creative way. So I guess I kind of wonder, while we're working on trying to put together or explore, maybe that's the better word, a program that fits those like bigger long-term goals, should we be recommending the allocation of the 14 million or whatever it is in that 50% category to the city now? And then, right, and then developers will know that there's another $14 million there. In my developer is not gonna take action to look for a piece of property if there's not any money available from the city, but then will take action, right, if there are resources. So I guess I'm, I mean, could we do that? Could we do that tonight? Could we do that at the next
This
meeting?
won't pass tonight, because I won't be voting for that, so
Alright.
there's no point in taking the motion, but let me explain why. It's because the question in my mind, which they were already talking about, is the right thing to just say $14 million, if that's the number we're just talking off the top of our head, plus the 2 million, it's 16 million. That's probably not even enough for one project based on historical costs here or whatever. Is that really the right thing? Do we really want somebody going out and buying a new piece of property? Are we better off if we have these RFPs? I'd like to know what's in them from these people who are supposedly going to get us the 1,000 units on our public land that we're going to need money to finance. Now, if we also know that the time frame of that is they're going to need X amount, but they're not going to need it for 2 years or whatever, and we think we had some idea of how much money we might actually get in that time, maybe I could be convinced of that. But there's still a choice between those two things, even if we're giving that money to the city, and I'd like to hear more from the city about what's involved in those two options, rather than just say here, put it in one or the other. So,
May I have thoughts on that?
May I just say too though,
I'm just saying,
Alright.
5 to 1, so it won't pass. So,
I'm not
I see what
suggesting
you're
there's a
saying.
vote,
Okay,
Michael,
that's
I'm
all
just
I'm telling
asking
you.
for people's opinions.
That's fine.
I'm curious.
I
about
am
what you have to say.
I am certainly with you. If we're not gonna do anything that's gonna build any projects or that we will be able to promote any projects on our own, get the money out and get them using it as fast as we can. And if they screw it up, then hey, it's on them. If we don't really have any power to say, hey, how about you use some of that airport land to build some affordable housing? You got 192 acres of land coming to the city. You don't need 192 acres for a big park while we're going through a housing crisis, a homelessness crisis, and when you're pushing more people out onto the streets, and when you're criminalizing homelessness. Well, if we can't get them to say, we'll get rid of this pickleball court and put in some temporary something in there, and we'll put some Measure GS kiosks out there so people know that they can come to us if they need a one-time rent help to keep them from being evicted. And we can do things like, if we can't do things like that, then just get it to the city council as fast as we can. Say, use it for what you think will build affordable housing, will help get us out of this housing crisis a little bit. And have we gotten to the point where I can ask, I ask that we rebuke the city council for not giving.
We haven't got
Oh,
I know it's frustrating.
all right,
I promise you it's the next agenda.
okay,
I promise you.
very good.
Okay. Did you have your hand up, Bruce?
Well, just 2 points. One is mathematically in March, when the memo came from the staff to the council, they made a specific decision to look at the 18 million that was raised in year one, and they allocated 7 million of it to flexible financial assistance and right to counsel, and they didn't do anything with the other 11. So in the process of how they were thinking about it, let's do it 1 year at a time. I don't know what the status is of, will there be another recommendation from the staff to the city council March 26th about things to do? That's just a question. And then the other point is just a point of procedure that all of us have the right to do whatever we want. We can write the city council a letter and say, do this, do that. But this committee's goal, responsibility is to oversee and monitor the GS money and to make recommendations on how it should be spent, not comment on every issue facing the city. So I just...
And if public land open to the possibility of building affordable housing helps us with using our government GS money. If we knew there was land available in that airport property, that we could fund a project there for $14 million and build how many ever units of affordable housing. If we knew that was possible, that would be something that would affect us. But to not even, well, we keep coming back to it, but to not even put us, to vote against even having a study about building housing there is just, it's irresponsible, and it's, yeah.
So let me just make one comment, which is that, regardless of what the city council does, nobody's building any housing at the airport right now, because under Measure LC that was passed by the voters.
I understand
No,
that.
hang on, it's not possible, so.
I
So we
understand.
can't say to them, spend the money to do that there.
Have we gotten there yet? Because I'm not even talking about, I'm not talking about us trying to build something there. I'm talking
Okay,
about us
then
rebuking
that's
them.
out of order for this
Ah.
agenda item. So no, we haven't gotten there yet. But Amy asked a question that I'm not sure whether other people have fully answered yet about whether their view is that we should just right now say, here's 14 million, put it into the, or whatever the number is, and put it into the,
Housing trust
they
fund.
right, just give it to the housing trust fund, for the over-the-counter thing, or.
I would support beefing up something like that, and it sounds like Wade would too, just to say that we've done something, because at this point, we haven't done much, so. And if there is more money coming in annually, holding on to it for the perfect thing to use it for, I think is not going to get us where we wanna go. I'm considering.
Mark or Bruce, did you want to comment on that? You're not
So
obligated to.
part
but
of
I'll give you
my-
the opportunity.
Part of my suggestion that we as a committee set March 1 as a deadline, that if we can reach a consensus on certain big points that we want to report to the public and the council, that would be the time to do it, as opposed to doing one-offs and say, put on the agenda for next meeting that they should move the money to the housing trust fund or whatever. I think we're getting more educated as in each meeting, and so it was my idea that maybe by March we'll be in a position to say what Milan just said, like, given, rather than starting, for at least for the money from the first year, I'm counting it's 11 million. And I do think there's a concept of saying, they looked at this idea in March as if they were just spending the first year money, and they weren't making a long-term policy choice about where the money should go forever, but just saying, how do we spend the first year money? And so would be fair for us to comment and say, the first year money's been sitting there now for 2 years, and you need to get it out the door one way or another, and that should be a priority. And we could then say, we feel differently about money, the later money, where you could have more time to maybe have different systems in place. These are, I'm just free associating, but I don't know, given as I sit here, I have no idea whether they have any real plans for spending the 11 million that came in for this purpose, and whatever the number is, 50% of 18, 9 million. I mean, the 7 was, I thought, that was the 30%, they were spending the 30%. So whatever else you allocated the rest of the 70% to, I don't think they've paid any attention to what to do with that 70% for year 1.
Yeah, I don't think they did anything about that. I thought when I looked at it that they spent more than 30% what they were allocating from the first year. Because I thought it was the 7 million, did that cover both the,
Yeah, and they
right
got $1
to
million
council
from
and,
somewhere else.
right,
At the
both the
need.
right to council and the other, I don't know, when I looked at it, it looked like they lost, right? But whatever the detail is, here's a factual question. At what point will the results of these RFPs that have now come back on Bergamot and.
So they're not
Apartment
our,
Structure One.
they're not
So
our-
I know.
yeah, they're not RFPs, they're notices of availability. We have to negotiate for at least 90 days with all of the proposals. So at this point, staff is not sure when those will become public. It's going through the process, but what I can say is, there is the Metro site that, has been identified, that Metro is going through their process. There's also.
Metro already awarded that to CCSM.
They awarded the land, but they still have to go through the process, and it likely or may need some funding for that. And there's also, yeah, I think those are the ones. And then I just also wanna make clear how affordable housing development works is the funds are not gonna go out the door right away. They're gonna be committed in a loan commitment, and then they'll still have to get other financing and other things about it. So I just wanna make that clear. It's a long path to getting even just breaking ground. So just making that clear as part of this discussion. And then, oh, sorry.
Natalie, can I just clarify something on that though? When the city commits the dollars, even though the dollars aren't necessarily going out the door right away, they're fixed, they're set, they're like put away into an escrow account, or do you hedge a little bit with that?
So, historically, when we've issued a commitment letter, finance has put it into another account that is committed solely for that. We've started just recently with knowing how long this time frame is once we enter into the loan agreement or the DDA, that is when we squirrel it away, not to use the super technical term. So that is when we would do it. I think the other thing too is what you're talking about of what's, it could be in the same thing. There might also be an opportunity in our housing trust fund guidelines. We're likely going to be revising it in the next year, just as part of its modernizing it, addressing some of the stuff. And each of the trust funds has like a standalone fact sheet, I guess you could call it, of how you want to use those funds. That might be an opportunity for the committee if you wanted to fold it into the housing trust fund and take it as part of the revise. So just wanted to share that for this group's awareness.
I don't know if you know the answer to this, I'm gonna ask the city manager directly, but in the so-called Renaissance plan, it talked about using a bunch of public land, including 4th and 5th in Arizona, to raise a whole bunch of money. What wasn't clear to me were two things. One, whether the commitment of the 331 affordable housing units that we made in the housing element for that was still going to be honored as part of that, and B, whether the money that is going to be generated is also going to be used in part to repay the housing trust fund from the money that was diverted from it, and the city council has promised to pay back. Do you know, because that also, how much money is going to be in that fund, which is going to the point somebody made earlier, which is, maybe this is the appropriate time to talk about it, is in order to know how this money ought to be spent, you need to know what other money is available in the city and what it can be used for. That would be a pretty big number, $40 million, so.
Yeah, so in terms of repaying back the housing trust fund, council adopted like a repayment plan for it, and this year, housing is receiving a very small portion of the repayment. It's not much, but to that specific question with the realignment plan, that would be, I can get those questions from the city manager's office.
I'm gonna see him direct. I mean, you can bring it back to the committee, but I'm gonna see him directly and ask him. Okay. Okay. Well, I'm not recommend to council that they give it to city staff to spend in the way that they will be most effective in the production of affordable housing, and then they can make the judgment between which of these various things it ought to be used for, since it sounds like the time frame for us to actually get that information is gonna be quite long, given what's going on with all of this. So maybe we can vote on that the next meeting, something like that. Okay, so now let's go to the last agenda item, which I know that Wayne has been waiting for, which is future agenda items, so you can express your view of what should be on it, and people can express their views about whether those are consistent with what the mission is, or it's within the jurisdiction of this committee. So take it away, Wade.
Thank you. I'm sorry if I get a little worked up. I stand on the 3rd Street promenade, and I advocate for the homeless, and I sing songs about raising taxes on the rich and showing that progressive government can make a difference in people's lives. And so I have no interest on being in any club that meets, that doesn't get something done towards that goal. So I should be told if I'm in the wrong place at some time. But I do think if we talk about agenda items, and I've mentioned many of these before, about, first of all, rebuking the Santa Monica City Council for taking a vote. The vote they took was not even to have a study about building any affordable housing. I know that it hasn't been given to the city, and that it was voted in 2014 to make a great park, but that was 2014. We're at 2025. We're in a housing crisis, a homelessness crisis here in California, and we're still heading in the wrong direction. And for us, if Santa Monica wants to show that we're a progressive government, that we don't believe in authoritarian government that should criminalize poor people and homelessness, if we want to show we're different than Trump, then we need to step up and to use 192 acres of land. I mean, that is a huge amount of land here in Santa Monica. That's not going to come again in our lifetime, and probably not young people's lifetime. It's not going to come again to the city to be able to help lift people out of poverty and build some affordable housing, and to not even take a study on that. I mean, they've had all kinds of studies already on this land for what kind of park you would like, what kind of different park.
So let's let some others comment on that one. We've laid out pretty clearly. So I'm calling you again for other ones, but I think if we do one at a time.
I didn't finish my comment on that particular one, but if you think I'm done,
I think you've made clear your position, and
so a rebuke on just
right,
not
I understand. I
having
want
a
to
study.
agendize the rebuke, and you've laid out the reasons why you think they should be
Okay.
rebuked. So I'm calling on myself next, okay?
Mhm.
So first of all,
Well, my point was not that. My point was that I have brought this up other times. I have not seen it on the agenda for us to discuss and to debate. And now I'm having to ram it in here because for some reason these things that I talk about don't get put on the agenda for us to debate and talk about.
okay, so now I'm calling on myself, okay, to respond
Yes.
to your comments, and then we'll let others respond. So first of all, on a policy level, I agree with you, and if you have any doubts about that, you can read the letter that I wrote on behalf of the Santa Monicans for Renters' Rights, urging the city council to do that. You can listen to my statements to the city council at that meeting. Now, let me finish my comments.
I listened. Very good.
You can listen to the recorded meeting of the Santa Monica Democratic Club, where the vote on that, where I argued strongly against the resolution was passed there, which supported what ultimately the city council did. You could go to the Summer Convention on Saturday, where we had a presentation from Cloverfield Common folks, even though SMER's not adopted their particular thing, but that we still think that's an important issue, which at least counting 1, 2, 3, 4, I think 5 of the city council members were there. So I agree with you on the policy. However, I also agree with what I think is Bruce's view on this, but I won't speak for him, but just judging on his other things, that rebuking the city council and that policy is not within the jurisdiction of this committee, and that's why I haven't agendized it as an item. Now, if other people can convince that it's different, that it is, with that doesn't mean that there isn't other forms and places for political activism along those lines. I just don't think that this commission does that. If you could build right now affordable housing there, and we said we have a project we want to fund on there or something, we could say you should do that, but that they should have done something different in an EIR, which would then somehow have to get to a vote, that just seems to me not with that. So I completely agree with you on policy. I've been as active as I can be in the political sphere to fight for that. I've not given up on fighting for that, but I just don't believe it's an appropriate agenda item for this committee. So that's my comment. Yes, Milan.
I agree with you about housing needing to be a part of that. I don't know enough about the language of this Measure GS to say whether or not, for myself, how I feel that role is, but given that you're one of the authors, I'm deferring to you in this situation. And going back to E, which I think we maybe jumped over, I think this speaks to our need for like a subcommittee on mission statement, because then we can be a little bit more clear about what is our role. Is our role thumbs up and downing city council actions, or is our role overseeing funding allocation? And I just don't know how clear that is yet. So can I propose a mission statement subcommittee? Or can we